There comes a time in every person's life when they face a quiet crisis, not the kind that shatters windows or sets alarms off. No, it's the kind that eats away in silence, the slow realization that you've been living the same year over and over again, calling it growth. It happens not because you're weak or lazy or lost. It happens because your brain is wired to survive, not to evolve. And survival is not enough anymore. See, the brain is a pattern machine. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It doesn't care if you wake up in the middle of the night haunted by dreams you never built. It only cares about one thing: predictability, familiarity, repetition, comfort. And if you don't take conscious control of those patterns, if you don't seize the steering wheel of your nervous system, then your life will be nothing more than a loop disguised as a legacy. Because make no mistake, you're not stuck, you're wired. And every thought you think, every habit you follow, every decision you delay, it's not who you are. It's just who your brain has practiced being. But here's the truth that shatters illusions. What the brain repeats, it reinforces. And what it reinforces, it becomes. This is not a metaphor, it's neuroscience. The more you rehearse fear, the better your brain becomes at being afraid. The more you delay, the more skilled your circuits become at avoiding discomfort. But the moment you begin to shift, when you begin to introduce friction, challenge, truth, your brain doesn't resist because it hates growth. It resists because growth means change. And change means death to the comfortable self. Now let that land. You're not just trying to become better. You are trying to kill off a version of yourself that your brain has kept alive for years. And that takes more than motivation. It takes reconstruction. You must become the architect of your own mind. Edison understood this. When he failed over 10,000 times to create the electric light, he wasn't failing to invent. He was rewiring his tolerance for error. He was teaching his nervous system to fall in love with the process, not the result. Because the brain doesn't change through success, it changes through effort repeated without reward, until the reward becomes inevitable. But today, most people are addicted to the hit, the click, the like, the shortcut. They want change without pain, growth without pressure, clarity without chaos. And that's not how the brain works, because the brain doesn't change through information. It changes through action. You can read 1,000 books on discipline and still press snooze tomorrow morning. Why? Because knowing what to do doesn't rewire the system. Only doing it again and again, especially when it's inconvenient, rewires the nervous system. And that's where the edge lies. Not in knowing more, in becoming someone who embodies more. There's a reason Carnegie didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for inspiration. He moved, built, failed, adapted, not because he had it all figured out, but because his brain was trained to act without certainty. That's what this generation has forgotten. We've been taught to seek safety, to manage risk, to optimize for comfort, and yet we wonder why we're anxious, scattered, exhausted. You're not broken. You're overstimulated. You're not lazy. You're addicted to easy dopamine. You're not lost. You're living on default settings, but that changes now. Because the brain is not fixed. It is plastic. And like plastic, it bends, it molds, it reshapes itself under pressure. The pressure you run from, that's the exact force that reshapes you. The early morning cold you avoid, that's where resilience is sculpted. The uncomfortable conversation you delay, that's where leadership is forged. The workout you skip, that's where neural endurance is built. Every act of resistance is a signal to the brain, this is who I want to become. And when repeated, daily, consistently, with intention, that signal gets loud. And the brain listens. Because neurons don't speak in goals. They speak in behavioral data. So stop waiting for clarity. Clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. The brain rewards what you rehearse. So if you want to feel confident, act confident. You want to feel focused, train focus. You want to feel unstoppable, Do the things that scare you when no one's watching. You rewire your brain not by reading, but by repeating the identity you haven't fully become yet. Let that settle. Repetition is the chisel. Pain is the forge. Discomfort is the tutor, and the world will not slow down for you to catch up. The world belongs to those who can rewire themselves faster than it changes. So here's the decision etched into the very core of your evolution: rewire your brain, or stay the same. Because if you don't interrupt your patterns will interrupt your life. And they won't ask permission. They'll show up in your relationships when you sabotage connection because your nervous system has been trained to anticipate abandonment. They'll show up in your work when you procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because your brain is avoiding the discomfort of failure. They'll show up in your body when you collapse into habits that numb, distract, pacify. But none of that is fate. It's wiring. And wiring can be changed. It starts with understanding a truth that ancient warriors and modern neuroscientists agree on. Your environment shapes your impulses, and your impulses shape your identity. You are not just what you believe. You are what you repeat. And repetition doesn't care about intention. It only cares about execution. The soldier who marches daily doesn't need motivation. His nervous system has adapted to the beat of discipline. The artist who shows up to create, even in silence, has trained her brain to crave output, not applause. The entrepreneur who rises before dawn doesn't rely on caffeine or playlists. He's running on neural alignment. And what about you? You say you want to change, but your environment is a shrine to the old you. Same apps, same distractions, same morning routine that isn't a routine, just a reaction. No system, no scaffolding, no friction between who you've been and who you need to become. But that changes the moment you make the invisible visible. The moment you stop trying to feel different and start behaving differently. Because feelings are a byproduct. They are not the source. And the brain is not a democracy. It does not wait for a vote of confidence before adapting. It waits for action. Repeated, deliberate action. This is how habits become identity, not by writing affirmations, but by doing the hard thing enough times that your brain stops fearing it. That's how fear dies, not with time, but with as exposure. You walk toward what you want. You sit with the discomfort. You don't flinch. And every time you do that, you send a message deep into your neural circuits. This is who we are now. And it sticks because the brain doesn't care about the story you tell yourself. It cares about the story you prove to yourself. So ask yourself, what am I proving? Every time I scroll instead of stretch, what am I telling my brain? Every time I skip the work, delay the call, choose the distraction, what story am I repeating? Because that's the story your brain believes, not your dreams, not your vision board, not your morning motivation video. At only repetition rewires. But here's the magic hidden in the struggle. You don't need massive transformation today. You just need deliberate contrast. You need to interrupt the default with something different, just long enough for the brain to notice. One cold shower, 1 hour of deep focus, one workout done without music, hype, or permission, one choice to face instead of flee. And then you repeat. You carve grooves where there used to be ruts. You forge patterns that turn into pathways. You build not because it's easy, but because the act of building is the transformation. That's what people don't understand about change. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about Sarah Zara's becoming someone consistent. And consistency is not a mood. It's not a personality trait. It's a neurochemical rhythm. You create it by showing up when every cell in your body tells you to retreat. You train it like a muscle. You suffer through the awkward, the boring, the brutally quiet early stages, not because you enjoy them, but because you understand this. Repetition with resistance leads to rewiring. Every rep counts, even when it doesn't feel like it. Every early wake up, every walk without your phone, every meal eaten with intention, every page you read instead of swipe These are the bricks in the temple of your new neural identity. And one day, without realizing it, you look up and you don't recognize the old triggers. The old urges no longer feel like home. The old self feels like a stranger. That's when you know you're winning. Because real transformation is not loud. It doesn't post progress pictures or beg for validation. It happens in silence, in your physiology, in the milliseconds between stimulus and response. Where you once reacted, you now redirect. That is the work, the unglamorous, sacred, biological work of rewiring. So don't tell me you're stuck. Tell me how long you've been practicing the pattern that's keeping you there. And don't tell me change is hard. Tell me what you're willing to do when no one's clapping. Because the nervous system adapts, but only to what you expose it to, X. And if you expose it to pain, truth, tension, structure, it will evolve. It will not ask if you're ready. It will ask become what you demand of it. That's the beauty of the brain. It reflects what you rehearse. So rehearse victory, rehearse grit. Rehearse the life that feels like hell at first, but leads to a heaven of integrity.